Thanks so much to Jonathan Lemire. Thank you, Kristen Welker, as always. And meanwhile, Dr. Mario Ramirez joins us. He's an emergency room physician treating COVID-19 patients and served as a pandemic and emerging threats coordinator at the Department of Health and Human Services under the Obama administration. First of all, I wanted to ask you about a potential breakthrough in some very good test results in a preliminary test on Remdesivir and the fact as a treatment. We're talking about, not a preventive, in tests where people were tested between 5 days, patients, and 10 days. Patients who were given the test or given the drug therapy earlier showed some good improvement. And Dr. Fauci in the Oval Office just said that this reminds him of the breakthrough during HIV/AIDS, when, of course, he was working on those major breakthroughs decades ago, and that they would start looking into FDA authorization.
Yeah, so I think we are starting to see the pieces of some good news, Andrea. I think it's important to note that the announcement from Gilead today is not an officially published study, but it is the sort of earliest raw data from a study that showed that when patients received Remdesivir, that their overall outcomes and improvements were the same in patients who got 5-day doses and 10-day doses. Now, that's important for a couple of different reasons. Now, this study in particular was what's called a phase 3 study, and it didn't include a placebo. So we only looked at patients who received the drugs. We didn't compare them to patients who didn't receive any treatment at all. But showing that they had the same outcomes in both 5-day and 10-day courses means that we're starting to get a better idea of how long these patients actually need these medicines. If it turns out that a patient only needs a 5-day course of Remdesivir, that would effectively double the number of doses that we would have available. The other thing that it does is it gives us some information about when we would need to start the medicine and which patients would benefit the most from it.
And it also would indicate, obviously Gilead is the manufacturer, so there's a big economic impact here potentially for them as well. But it indicates that there could be some therapies if you come in sooner for treatment rather than waiting and delaying as well.
That's right, Andrea. We generally know that among antiviral treatments that the course and the improvements are better when we start patients on medicine earlier. We certainly know that from influenza. We're just now starting to get better ideas with this coronavirus when exactly we need to start treatment, but the data does suggest that the sooner we start it, the better. And that, I think, gets to the point of testing capacity and how important it is that we identify patients early.
I wanted to ask you about a lot of talk about the Oxford vaccine, that it could be far sooner to have a vaccine than people have indicated. Some people are cautioning to be very careful with that because to, first of all, go through the human trials, the safety procedures for any vaccine, and then to scale up to be able to treat, potentially hundreds of millions of people requires a lot more than what some people are talking about early fall. What is your take on that?
So I think this is some promising news out of the UK. What the researchers there were able to do was repurpose a vaccine that they were already working on for another coronavirus called Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS. And they were able to repurpose that vaccine and change some of the genetic material for COVID. And because of that, they were able to accelerate into the phase 2 trials much faster. Now, that's important because sort of passing through those gates of clinical trials takes some amount of time. It's not until you get to a phase 3 trial where you're in fact actually trying to figure out whether patients who receive a vaccine fare better than those who don't. In phase 1 and phase 2, you're really just looking for immune response and safety. So the fact that they were able to go straight to phase 2 could potentially shorten the timeline. Now, it's important to note, though, that phase 3 can really cause a significant delay, because you need to have a significant number of patients who are still sort of developing the virus in your natural population to determine whether or not the vaccine actually works. The way that we would deploy a vaccine like this in a phase 3 trial is that we would give it to a group of high-risk personnel and then look over a period of time to determine how many of them develop the infection and how many don't. And so because of that, you have to have a high enough incidence of the disease still developing in the population to actually measure that. If the levels drop too low, then it takes much longer to actually determine whether the vaccine has an effect. And so while a September timeline is really hopeful, there's so many other things that can go into this, and that's to say nothing about production capacity and actually scaling up the production of the vaccine if it actually works.
A lot of questions there as well, but so much more context from you. We really appreciate it. Dr. Mario Ramirez, thanks so much for being with us. And Also today.